You love the shirt? It's got a great logo on it, doesn't it? Yeah. I've had several people, just since Nate said that, if you are looking for some of our church apparel, you need to send an email to the church, and we can try to figure out a way to order some more shirts or whatever. We got these nice polos. I like them. So just let us know if you want to look as good as me. Okay, yeah. This year we've been going through the book of Luke as we search how to become authentic disciples of faith. For the past few weeks we've been looking at some tough teachings of Jesus. First we looked at how authentic believers of Christ have to choose to be humble. Last week we saw the steps of the prodigal. Now we turn to chapter 16 of Luke. And Luke turns his attention from God's joy over finding that lost son to possessions. So we went from this lost person and the joy of that to dealing with material things. In the beginning of chapter 16, there's a parable of what's called the dishonest manager. And these implications are talking about how we handle our resources. And this is going to be a tough teaching. Commentator Philip Ryken tells a story of a basketball star named Latrell Sprewell, this guy right here. His view of money is massively flawed, okay? One season, Sprewell demanded a bigger contract from the Timberwolves, the basketball team. He told the media he was disgusted with his measly pay, his one-year contract of $14.6 million. When they asked him why he didn't work harder to try and win a championship ring for his team and then getting a better contract, he said, "Why would I want to help them win a title? They're not doing anything for me. I'm at risk here. I have a lot of risk here. I have a family to feed." When you break down his contract, he makes $40,000 a day. That's more than many people make in a year. An improper focus of money causes people to really get skewed about things that are really important or of eternal importance. One of the complaints that a lot of people give about church is, whenever I go to church, all I hear is they talk about money. All they talk about is money. And so I have a few comments about that. I've heard it many times. First, let me say this. The Bible talks more about money than it does heaven. You want to hear about heaven, but we want to talk about everything that's in Scripture. And so if it's in the Bible, we're going to talk about it. Secondly, if you think that's all we talk about, I can give you every manuscript I've ever preached and show you that less than 6 Sundays a year, we really talk about money. So even I am not talking about it enough, apparently, according to Scripture. Really, that comment is usually a flippant remark trying to justify why they don't go to church. But why do churches so often seem to talk about money? Why is that stigma out there? Well, I already said it. First of all, it's in the Bible. And if it's in the Bible, we have to talk about it. And let's be honest, here's the second reason we need to talk about it. We as American Christians are horrible at spending our money wisely. We are horrible at it. So it's a very practical matter that we need to see how God tells us, as His followers, to be authentic people, to use our finances in a right manner. So that's what we're going to talk about today in chapter 16. Before we get into verses, though, we need to set the context before the content, meaning the setting, everything that's going on, before we look at the words. Darrell Block is one of the many commentators that I read on this, and he said, the parable of the unjust steward is one of the most difficult parables of all of Jesus' parables to ever understand. At first reading, it seems like Jesus is endorsing bad financial information here. But Jesus can't endorse anything bad, can He? If He endorsed something bad, that would make Him skewed in His thinking, and therefore he can't be the Son of God. So there's got to be something more to this really hard to understand. So let's look at the setting first. In chapter 6 or 15, the parable of the lost sheep, the coin, and the son, it's talking to the Pharisees and other people. And so he's explaining something broadly to people who have not committed. In chapter 16, he's talking to his disciples. So he's going to get deeper into it to people who already believe. So that is very important to know. And so we need to look at it from a perspective of we already believe in Jesus. Therefore, this isn't surface things. This is going deep. So let's get into this. We're going to break this down a few verses at a time. Verses 1 and 2. Jesus told this story to his disciples. See, it's only to his disciples. There was a certain rich man who had a manager handling his affairs. One day a report came that the manager was wasting the employer's money. So the employer called him in and said, "What's this I hear about you? Get your report in order because you are going to be fired." So the rich man, he's got this employee who's handling all of his estate and everything. He gets a report. Somebody tattletales that his employee is mishandling the money. So he tells him, "Go finish your last report. You're done. You're fired." The manager was guilty. Notice that he's not going to defend himself. He didn't start giving all these, "Well, no, I did this. He just accepts it. Jesus did not specify what this guy had done wrong, except to say he's dishonest. Okay, and this is where it starts getting confused. Well, why is he talking about a dishonest guy with a guy who's rich, and isn't the love of money all the root of all kinds of evil? Why, Jesus, what are you trying to talk about here? Well, let's keep going. The manager knew if he cooked the books and then he turns them over, what's going to find out? He's going to find out the full spectrum of how bad he was with the finances, which means he might not just be fired. He could be jailed or worse. Let's go to verse 3. The manager thought to himself, "Now what? My boss has fired me. I don't have the strength to dig ditches, and I'm too proud to beg." He said, "What am I going to do? I'm not going to lower myself to dig ditches. And there's no way I'm going to beg." So he's too proud, he's too lazy, he's got to figure out something to do, and that's when he came up with this scheme. So look at this, verse 4. I know how to ensure that I have plenty of friends who will give me a home when I am fired. So he invited each person who owned his employer money to come and discuss the situation. He asked the first one, "How much do you owe him?" The man replied, "I owe him 800 gallons of olive oil." So the manager told him, "Take the bill and quickly change it to 400 gallons. "And how much do you owe my employer?" The next man, "I owe him 1,000 bushels of wheat," was the reply. Here the manager said, "Take the bill and change it to 800 bushels. This guy who had been found guilty of misappropriation of funds goes and misappropriates funds. He keeps going at it. He does something unthinkable. He goes and he says, "You owe the guy, my boss, 1,000. Let's just knock it in half. Or go to 800. And well, you owe him 800, so let's knock that one in half." And he calls in the loans and tells them a way to make him, not the boss, him look nice. It's dishonest. It's shrewd. Now let's see what the employer had to say. Verse 8. The rich man had to admire the dishonest rascal for being so shrewd. And it's true that the children of this world are more shrewd in dealing with the world around them than the children of the light. What? Jesus just said the boss admired the dishonesty of his employer. Do you understand why this is a weird parable? We don't talk about a lot of it. In fact, I don't know if I've ever heard a sermon on this, which meant I had to do a lot of research on it. Some translations say the rich man commended the dishonest manager. Why would Jesus say this? This goes against everything good. We don't commend bad things. We don't admire people who cheat and swindle. The rich man may have been angry with his manager, but he saw something in this. What should the rich man do? Should he go out and say, wait a minute, to all the people who owe him stuff, is this guy's fired, you can't do this. I'm going to take your bill of 400 gallons and turn it back to 800. Now, if you just had your bill turned in half, and then they came back and said, hey, you need to owe me all of it, how are you going to feel? Well, that ain't right. That's not my fault. Your employee changed it. Don't punish me for what your guy did. And so he knows he got me. Right in the end, he got me. And in order to save face, I can't do anything about it. The rich man had to admire this dishonest manager for his shrewdness. Now, Phil Roykin said this, though the rich man could hardly credit the man for his honesty or integrity, but when it came to shrewdness, he had to give him his due. There is a legitimate moral difference between saying, I applaud the clever steward because he asked dishonestly, and saying, I applaud the dishonest. Let me say this. I want to make sure I don't mess this up. I applaud the clever steward because he acted dishonestly, meaning I'm proud of what he's done. Versus, I admire the way he was so shrewd in being dishonest. I don't say it's good, but he got me. I see a lot of puzzled looks. The rich man's saying that, while I don't agree with it, that was very clever. Not saying, oh, that was a great thing to do. He's not saying it's a great thing. So let me say something real quick. Jesus is not endorsing dishonesty. He's not saying that this is how we should handle our finances. He is not approving of sin. Instead, Jesus is saying this. He's given an example of how shrewdly non-Christians can be when they act with their own interest. When they're thinking of themselves, non-Christians will do anything they can if it's going to benefit themselves. That's what Jesus, remember, he's talking to believers, and he's saying this is how non-Christians are going to act. And it's true, the children of this world are more shrewd in dealing with the world around them than the children of the light. Darrell Brock said, Jesus' remarks is that those of the world, the unbelievers, give more foresight into their future. They are more shrewd in their dealings with people than generally God's children are. So here's the question. If unbelievers are constantly thinking of ways to get ahead in this world, shouldn't believers be constantly thinking of ways to get into the next world? If unbelievers are constantly trying to get ahead in this world, shouldn't we be saying, how can I make it more and more into heaven? Shouldn't our aim, shouldn't our goals, shouldn't all of our energies be focused on getting into heaven? And Jesus is saying the people of this world think more about putting it in their bank account than you do in your heavenly home. And so there's a focus of this. It's not endorsing dishonesty. It's saying, look how much more they think of their wallets than you are thinking of eternity. And then Jesus moved on, verse 9. Here's the lesson. Don't you love it when he says, okay, everybody, here's the point. Here's the lesson. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. Then when your possessions are gone, they'll welcome you to an eternal home. Notice it said eternal. He's not talking about temporary stuff on earth. I like it when the Bible is very blunt and points out here. And so Jesus says the first lesson is, be generous with your money. Just be generous with it. Jesus said in verse 9, use your earthly resources to benefit other people. I'm just going to tell you right now, if you lost $2 out in the parking lot, it's already in the offering. Thank you. Somebody also lost a $20 bill last week. Nobody's name was on it, so it's in the offering. We thank you for being generous. That's not what we're talking about, though, is it? We're talking about people who specifically say, hey, I've got this surplus here. We had somebody come and give us a surplus to us yesterday. We got corn on the cob now in our house. They gave us out of their surplus. They were generous with things. When we are generous with our things, we are honoring God. Jesus says to do this. And Jesus tells his disciples in this passage, use your wealth for an eternal purpose, not for an earthly gain. Kent Hughes captures the essence of verse 9. He says, what is inescapably clear here is that our wealth and possessions are to be used to win eternal friends. How can I use my money to help influence somebody that they can become a believer in God? How can I spend my money so that it points people to Jesus? And then when we get to heaven, we're friends. That's what he's saying. It's not buying somebody and say, hey, I'll give you $50 if you come to church. It's not what he's saying. He's saying, how do you spend your money that focus people on God? We must give generously of our money for the spreading of the gospel. If we are not doing so, if we are not making proper use of what God has given us to enhance our relationship with God and point people to Him, we are doing a dishonor to God, and this is intensely a spiritual matter. When we don't use our money right, it is lack of faith or belief in God. So be generous. Ask yourself right now, how am I at being generous? How would God grade me in how generous I am? But Jesus doesn't stop there. It goes on, verse 10. If you are faithful in little things, you'll be faithful in large ones. But if you are dishonest in little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. If you are untrustworthy about worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches of heaven? If you're not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with things of your own? We've all heard these verses, but remember, we got to take them all into context before we listen to the content. So after being generous, the second lesson is be faithful in your stewardship. Stewardship, there's a church word, right? What is being a steward? It means the job of supervising or taking care of something that isn't yours, such as organization or property, just like the shrewd manager was in this parable. He wasn't handling things right. Jesus states the principle in verse 10, one who is faithful in little will be faithful in much. Then he follows with two questions, and he talks about them with them. Some people say that they would give more to God's work if they had more money to give. Oh, if I made more money, I'd be able to support the church so much more. Dr. James Kennedy told a story of a man who came to Peter Marshall, a former chaplain in the United States Senate, and he was concerned with tithing. And he says, I have a problem. I've been tithing some time, and it wasn't too bad when I made $20,000 a year. I could afford to give $2,000, but now you see I'm making $500,000. And there's just no way I can afford to give $50,000. I can't afford to give $50,000 away a year. Dr. Marshall reflected on it, and he says, I've got some advice. I know what I'll do. I think we should pray about this. The man agreed, so Dr. Marshall bowed his head. He said, Dear Lord, this man has a problem. I pray you'll help him. Lord, reduce his salary back to a place where he can afford to tithe. I would give so much more if I made more money. No. If you are faithful in little, then you will be faithful in much. If you are irresponsible with little, you will be irresponsible with much. You don't tell a kid who, hey, you just learned to ride a bike, here's the car keys. You gradually grow them and mature them so that they can handle all these responsibilities. If they can't handle riding a bike, why would I trust them driving my car? We have to be responsible in the little things, then God will pour out blessings of even more. And if we are not getting those blessings of more and more, maybe we need to look and realize we're not being great stewards of what He's already given us. Third point of this parable, verse 13. No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one, love the other. You'll be devoted to one, despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. This was an easy one to see. That's why I didn't put it in the blank, because you already know this. Serve God, not serve money. There's no middle ground here. The note in the ESV Bible puts it this way. Jesus does not say should not serve, but cannot serve. You cannot serve God and money. We struggle with money because there's a sense in which it's necessary for life and well-being. Money is so alluring and enticing. And if we don't learn how to handle money, it will handle us. It will become our master. My middle brother and I, we handle finances totally different growing up. When I found money, I went and put it in my piggy bank. When I gained money because of chores or helping other people, it went in my piggy bank. When my middle brother got money, he spent it right away. I mean, like, he had to go buy something. And then later on in high school, when I had a job, I had money. I bought my own car. I bought my own clothes. You hear that, teenagers? My parents didn't buy my clothes because they picked out weird clothes. So I went and bought my own clothes, my own shoes. My brother, he was given money. It was gone. We need to learn to master the money so it doesn't master us. So let's bring it down to one simple, easy, understand statement. If we're following the words of Christ here, that means this. We should handle possessions generously, faithfully, and for the glory of God. That's it. Generously, faithfully, and for His glory. Not for our pompous attitude. Not for, look what I've got now. Look at my good kicks here. For His glory. Our possessions, how we should use them, should reflect who we serve. Are we serving God with all of our possessions, or are we serving our possessions? These are Jesus' words, not mine. In January 2012, CNN gave this report, and it's going to sound positive until you really think about it. The positive report about young Christians who are fighting against human trafficking. Over 42,000 young people, mostly college students, gathered in Atlanta for an event focused on worship and the abolition of sex trafficking. CNN seemed impressed that these young Christians didn't just sing songs, they also gave money to help end the horrors of human trafficking. The video version of the article even showed a young person pulling $50 out of her purse. Then the shot displayed a cash register ringing up $50. It was definitely impressive seeing that all these kids, I call them kids, they think they're adults, in their 20s, they're adulting-ish, they were giving a lot of their finances to helping stop this, which is a great thing. And if you follow that, the next scene was $50 spending and a cash register, and it showed the new trends, clothing trends and stuff that kids were spending money on. And so they did a one-time gift for this, which was great, and we should do this. We should stop human trafficking. It needs to end. But then weekly, they're spending this much money on clothes. And so what did the world see? You give a one-time gift, and then what? It sounds great to raise money and stop that atrocious sin, but that's not what Jesus is talking about. We sometimes get a nice warm, fuzzy feeling when we drop money in the plate. The amazing truth is godly men and women do this every single Sunday, and they don't get their names on CNN. They are doing it because they spend their finances based on God's heart. And so it's not about the amount you give, it's the reason you give. Our use of money does not get us into heaven. You cannot buy your own seat into heaven. I've been to a church where if you gave enough money, you got a little brass tack put right on the seat where you would sit. So you had an eternal life assigned seat there, it seemed. And you couldn't sit in old Maud's chair. That was hers. We can't do that into heaven. But I can use my finances now to show I am going to heaven. I can use my finances now to say, I want you to come with me. If you're a Christian, will you be generous with your money? Will you be faithful in your stewardship? Will you serve God? And will you not serve money? You know I have a habit of doing about a 35, 45, 50-minute sermon. And some of you would just look like, he's done? This is a short chapter, and it was a simple point. Serve God, or let the things of this world master you. That's really what it comes down to. And I can honestly say there are so many people in this church who they use their resources to serve God. They use their resources. They're generous. They're free to help others. And God is blessing them. And because God is blessing them, those blessings are trickling over them, sometimes flowing, and impacting the rest of the church and the community around them. And that is what God is saying. And I am so proud to be a part of a church that is filled with people like that. And we need to all stand up. If you're struggling in this area, we can hook you up with some mentors who will help you purposely spend your finances to honor God. If you're struggling with that, don't sit there and say, well, I got to figure it out. No. Jesus says we are here as a church to lift one another up. If you are doing great in this, praise God. Don't seek attention for it. But thank you for loving God and honoring Him. We all have to use our finances for His glory. Whether you're a teenager or well beyond teenager. Will you do that this week? So we're going to stand. We're going to move on and get into a time where we worship Him because He freely used His resources to save us from hell.